In December of 2018, it was being reported that the global games industry was on course to being worth almost $135 billion. That's just over £102 billion at current exchange rates. But how does an aspiring games designer or artist get into this lucrative industry? Beyond the years of study and practice to meet the technical and artistic standards, there's two routes you're typically going to be considering when it comes to employment. Do you want to work for one of the larger AAA companies producing titles such as Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, or Grand Theft Auto as part of a team of hundreds of other employees? Or would you be looking to work in an independent company with a much smaller team and a tighter budget? Both of these paths generally come with their own pros and cons, affecting job security and financial income, or areas such as creative freedom and mental well-being. In this video, we'll be looking at how these factors may affect the general quality of life for a professional in the games industry. In February 2019, I went to the Innovation Centre at the University of Essex to interview games designer Mark Backler. With almost 10 years of experience in larger AAA companies and many high-profile games under his belt, Mark is now the founder of his own independent studio, Sketchbook Games. During this interview, we covered many areas related to his broad experience in the industry. Of course, the biggest difference between a AAA company and any independent studio is going to be the issue of money. As of April 2019, video game giant Electronic Arts has a net worth of just over $30 billion, having reached a high of over $45 billion the previous year. Working for an established and highly profitable corporation such as Electronic Arts means you'll be guaranteed a steady income. Indie studios, however, are independent because they're not associated with a publisher and thus must secure funding for development on their own if they're going to cover production costs and hire additional team members. It can take months or even years to develop even a smaller game, so a mere promise of a game's eventual sales isn't going to pay the bills and put food on your table. Fortunately, funding options exist, and Mark's company have made use of them to fund the development of their upcoming game, Lost Words. There are funding schemes obviously available in this country. I believe you use one for your company.
We've used several, yeah. We got funding from the Wellcome Trust. We got 2 separate grants from them. We got a loan from Creative England, and we also raised some SEIS investment through Games Co London and Goldfinch, and we got the UK Games Fund grant, and we've also claimed video games tax relief. So on the money that you spend, you can claim 20% of 80% of what you spent, or something like that. It's like a percentage of your costs you can claim back.
Cool. Are there certain parameters that you have to keep to? Like, I'm sure I've heard of some fund where you have to either set your game in Britain or have British values.
That's the one, yeah. But it's actually like not too restrictive. Like I guess that's to just stop people from registering a company here and then claiming the benefits and sort of taking money out of the system. But actually, like if you're a British team or your game is in any way like British, or it's actually being developed over here, then it's very easy to pass that test.
In addition to these funding schemes, there are also crowdfunding options such as Kickstarter or Indiegogo, in which donators pledge money to a concept. These usually have multiple tiers of rewards according to the amount of money pledged. Alternatively, a developer might make their unfinished game available prior to its official release date via early access. This allows for developers to get both extra funds and player feedback that can aid the game's development. Though large companies have access to greater funds, their costs are also much higher. It is not unheard of for a company to terminate large numbers of employees in one fell swoop. In February of 2019, Activision Blizzard, responsible for games such as Overwatch, World of Warcraft, and Destiny, cut 8% of its workforce to almost 800 people. Despite 2018 being a record-setting year for the company, they were still disappointed by certain products not meeting their financial expectations. The next month, Electronic Arts also terminated around 350 jobs after the poor commercial performance of Battlefield 5 and the poor critical reception of Anthem. It is not uncommon for games companies to have a period known as crunch time, in which employees will put in extra hours to ensure a game meets its deadlines. This overtime is often unpaid, and a company is more likely to value the workers who appear passionate about the project by going above and beyond the enforceable legal working time, which in the UK is 48 hours.
Do workers often feel sort of compelled to put in these extra hours out of fear of losing their position or being terminated entirely?
I guess there's certainly that, like when you're on a contract and you want to be kept on, and if there's lots of other people in doing the same job on contracts as well, then like the people who put in the extra hours and who do the best work are the ones who are going to get kept on. So there's sort of that element of it, and then with companies making redundancies and stuff, if you're not putting in the same extra time that other people are, then it definitely could paint a bit of a target on you. There is that kind of concern, I guess, from people.
Naturally, working excessive overtime can have an effect on an employee's health and general well-being. Whilst the crunch culture is a heavily publicised aspect of working in the AAA games industry, it isn't necessarily absent for those working in independent studios, even if it's ultimately your own decision.
It's kind of varied. I guess there has been times when I've put in loads of extra hours, and then at the moment I'm trying to be as controlled as possible with it.
In October of 2018, an article by Hayden Taylor on GamesIndustry.biz detailed a protest on social media led by professionals in the games industry. From indie level to larger studios, workers complained about the frustrating working conditions they are faced with, citing issues such as low pay, overtime, and career progression, amongst other things. Jen McLean, Executive Director of the International Game Developers Association, soon addressed the protest with the following statement. Unfortunately, the challenges games developers have experienced this summer are not new to our community. There has long been a culture of positioning game development as a dream job, and using that perception as an enabler for lower pay for comparable positions, other exploitative employment practices, and even toxic work environments and harassment. Thankfully, because of tools like social media, today's game developers have a louder voice to challenge the status quo. Over the past several years, mental well-being has been a theme not only in the workplace for game studios, but in the games themselves. Examples include Celeste, That Dragon Cancer, and a multi-award-winning Hellblade. Aside from their themes, another thing these games have in common is that they were all created by indie developers. As the larger companies release sequel upon sequel for their biggest franchises, we appear to be looking to smaller developers for innovation and risk-taking. This leads us to our final topic. In 2012, Jaeger Development's Spec Ops: The Line was released to critical acclaim. On the surface, this game appears to be a fairly generic third-person shooter, but the narrative structure and impactful depiction of war and moral ambiguity makes it a title that people are still talking about to this day. This praise, however, was in response to the single-player experience. Since Jaeger Development was not an independent studio, their publisher, 2K Games, were able to insist on certain features. In an interview with Polygon, Spec Ops creative lead Corey Davis said the following. The multiplayer mode of Spec Ops: The Line was never a focus of the development, but the publisher was determined to have it anyway. It was literally a checkbox that the financial prediction said we needed, and 2K was relentless in making sure that it happened, even at the detriment of the overall project and the perception of the game. Spec Ops: The Line stands as a strong example of why being an independent company could cater for more creative freedom. A publisher can be detached from the creative intentions and instead look towards current market trends and what should generate income based on the competition. Of course, working free from the constraints of a publisher does affect the funding of the project, as we covered earlier in this video. And so, it's through solo developers or small studios that we have seen some of the more innovative titles, in a market already full of almost indistinguishable racing games and first-person shooters. In 2011, Marcus Persson, better known as Notch, released Minecraft. As a self-publishing developer, he had full creative control over the game. With versions released across multiple platforms such as Windows, mobile, and 2 generations of PlayStation and Xbox, Minecraft is reported to be the second best-selling game of all time behind Tetris. In September of 2014, Marcus left his company Mojang after selling it to Microsoft for $2.5 billion. The decision to work for either the independent or larger studios has no true right or wrong answer. Ultimately, it is up to the professional to decide which path to take, but from this research we can assume that both camps cater for different lifestyles and circumstances. Somebody who just wants their foot in the door of this industry, a recognisable project on their CV, or a steady income would likely be most comfortable working in a AAA company. Those seeking more creative freedom, smaller projects, and who can risk a less reliable income may find greater quality of life with an independent or smaller studio. But we must be aware that no two companies operate in exactly the same way, and the research performed here is to form a more general statement on the working environments.